Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I've got a science fiction movie that very few people know about, except for about 1.4 billion people in the middle of Asia. Being a movie buff can take you down a strange path sometimes. Being a science fiction movie buff can take you down even stranger paths. And this week I was looking for something to talk about on Science Fiction Saturday, which indeed this video is. And I couldn't find too much that I really was jazzed about. So I checked out my usual haunts, the places I can go to see movies. The Sun in Yarraville didn't have anything because it's school holidays at the moment. So every kid in the known universe is either watching a Pixar film or a Despicable Me movie. And so the cinemas are chock-a-block with short, underage people wanting to go to the cinema. I realised then that there was other stuff on at the Village Cinema in Sunshine, which is in a shopping mall. It's a chain cinema. But because of the Indian diaspora that we have here in Australia, and great, I'm in favour of multiculturalism, I'm in favour of diversity, civilisations that are diverse survive, civilisations that are monocultural don't survive. So I'm kind of happy with all that. And there were Indian movies showing alongside Despicable Me 37 and Pixar one-word title movies. I thought, I'll see what's there. Let's just take a look at this. And there's a science fiction movie on, which is 3 hours long. And the first session starts at 10:45 in the morning. Great. I can go and see that. I can go and deliver some things I'm giving away to a charity store. Everybody wins. So I delivered a car full of stuff to the charity store because I am trying to empty out a lot of the stuff I've got. And getting out and about was a bit difficult because it was bloody cold. For us, it was cold. Now, again, that it depends on where you live, what you consider to be cold. In my case, 2 degrees centigrade, 9 o'clock in the morning, drove out there, delivered the car full of stuff to the charity store, and then whipped over to Sunshine for the movie. Yeah, I got myself a snack because it was still a little early. Showed them my film critics pass so I could get into the cinema without paying money. Love doing that. Suddenly I go around the corner and there's literally 150 metre line of children waiting to see Despicable Me 37. And so I had to cut my way through enormous lines of screaming children to get up to the front of the line because they're not queuing and handing in tickets. They're just lined up waiting to go in the cinema. Get in there, go to the right. There are two lots of cinemas. There are the cinemas to the left, which are all the low number cinemas, and there are the cinemas to the right. So I go up, hand my ticket, go off to the right, go into an enormous cinema, which has 3 people in it. Me and 2 other people. Couple of Indian guys up the back and me down the centre of the cinema. No screaming kids. No problem there. All the screaming kids are 100 metres away down the other end of the cinema. And it's a very large cinema complex. So, go down there, settle in, and found myself in another world. Because for a start, the ads were very different. There was an ad on how to send rupees back to home. If you were an Indian person in the Indian diaspora, there was, I think it might have been Western Union or something, telling people in this ad how to send rupees to India to support the family. I'm all in favour of that, but it's not the usual kind of ad I see when I go to the cinema. I thought, great, alternate universe. I'm going to approach it like an alternate universe. And so I did. So then I start getting movie trailers. And I don't know any of the movies because they're all released by a company called Mind Blowing Films, which is a small company that gets the rights to and releases Indian diaspora movies in Australian markets. And so I get one movie which is about a guy who was engaged to be married and then went off and killed a whole bunch of people and went to jail for 22 years. And he gets out of jail and him and his fiancée reunite and they're kind of working out their relationship. That's one of the movies. Looked an interesting movie. Not particularly the kind I wanted to see, but interesting movie nonetheless. Then there was another trailer for another movie, which was about a guy who broke up with his wife because he was an arsehole. He was a violent arsehole. And the family are talking to the wife and about how it's not good to be by yourself and all that kind of thing. And he's trying to become a better person to get back with his wife, even though he's basically a landscape of red flags. And I thought, no, different culture, but still, no, I don't want that movie. It reinforces a certain cultural status quo that I didn't like. So I was kind of uncomfortable with that film. So then we get to the movie I'm there to see, which is a movie called Kalki, 2898 AD, which took me down a rabbit hole after I saw the movie. This movie, it's in Telugu. It was made in southern India, southeastern India. And you got to remember, India is a country with 1.4 something billion people in it. So it's an enormous country with a whole bunch of different cultures altogether. And there's a whole bunch of different versions. There's a Hindi version. There's the Telugu version in Telugu language. There's a 3D version. There's an IMAX version of it. This movie is big in India and in Indian diaspora markets. It is the biggest movie ever made in India. The budget was $70 million US, which is a hell of a lot more in India. The rupee US dollar exchange rate's really high, and it was crazily successful. It came out in late June, and in the first week or so made a ton of money in India. It got shipped over to Australia for the diaspora market. It's showing in 200 screens here in Australia. It's showing in 20 screens in Fiji. It's showing in about 40 or 50 screens in New Zealand. This is a big movie. This is a big science fiction epic movie, but nobody's heard about it outside the Indian diaspora. It's an epic film. It's a big scale, big budget for India science fiction movie. And suddenly I'm in the audience about to watch this film, and I get dumped into Hindu mythology. One of the world's largest epic poems, the Mahabharata, which has 100,000 plus verses in it. It is an enormous epic. It's 10 times as long as the Iliad and the Odyssey put together. It's one of the bases of Hindu belief systems. This is big stuff. This is like 20 Bibles all smashed together. So the movie starts out 6,000 years before most of the action, which is when the Mahabharata war was in this epic poem, where the gods are fighting against each other and two large families are fighting against each other. There are mythical weapons. There are gods and chariots. There are enormous 8-foot tall warriors. There's whole armies with elephants and horses and spears and everything, and bows and arrows and all that kind of stuff. I get dumped right at the start of the film into this, having no cultural context for it at all. And the special effects are pretty good. They're not Hollywood perfect, but they're good and serviceable. They're kind of like 5 years ago, good special effects. And the greatest weapon ever thought up in the ancient world, it wasn't actually created, but it was thought up, is part of the Mahabharata. It's a thing called the Brahmashastra, which is the ultimate weapon. This thing makes the Infinity Gauntlet look like Audrey Hepburn's glove in Breakfast at Tiffany's. It is an incredible weapon. I've got the Wikipedia page up just to give you a context of what I saw in this movie. They actually use this weapon as a part of this battle. It blazes with the terrible flames within a huge sphere of fire. Numerous peals of thunder can be heard. Fishes start on the earth. Rivers become dry. Thousands of meteors fall. And all living creatures became terrified with great dread. When it strikes an area, it will just be destroyed, and nothing will ever grow there for 155.5 trillion years. And the weird thing is that this weapon can be manifested by a number of different gods. It can be manifested in anything, including a blade of grass. So the weapon can be like a blade of grass. But this is the bit that really blew my mind. I read this after I saw this weapon being used at the start of this movie, at the start of a 3-hour movie. Its true power is the ability to remove someone's existence from the past, present, and future. Upon being fired, the arrow will immediately annihilate their existence. And because if something never existed, never will exist, it is impossible to imagine that entity in any facet or form. So you get shot by this arrow, you never existed, you never will exist, nobody remembers you. You have been erased from reality. What in the Marvel uses this as a weapon, it's an incredibly powerful weapon, apart from the fact that if you shoot the arrow somewhere, all the land is useless for 155.5 trillion years. And it goes off like a nuke. And they actually convey the power of this weapon in the first 5 minutes of this movie. So right from the start, my mind is incredibly blown. And then they go 6,000 years from the Mahabharata battle to 2898 CE. And there's the last city on Earth, a place called Kalki is the last city on Earth. All the resources of the Earth are gone. It's a dry desert, and everybody is coming to the city. Human fertility rates are really low. Everybody's scrambling to make it in this city because there's an inverted pyramid on top of the city where the ruler of the last city on Earth rules. And he's a guy called Supreme Yaskin, who's 200 years old and is kept alive by an extract which is farmed in the wombs of fertile pregnant women. So he has a whole bunch of pregnant women locked up in quite posh cells. They get put in a machine. It sucks this stuff out of their wombs and drops them into an enormous fire pit. The stuff then gets injected into the Supreme Yaskin, and he stays alive again. Darth Vader is nothing compared to this guy. This guy is the nastiest of nasty pasties. Now, in the last city, there's also a bounty hunter who goes and collects bounties. He's arrogant, he's egotistical, he's a ladies' man, he loves himself way too much. And he is a guy called Bhairava, who is actually, and he doesn't know this until near the end of the movie, the reincarnation of Kali, the Hindu god. And he has an AI car, which is very cheeky. He's constantly broke. He fights all the other bounty hunters to get the bounties. He's basically a nutcase. And he gets a bounty to find a woman who has escaped from the breeding area of the Supreme Yaskin. She's escaped and is fleeing into the desert because she hid her pregnancy and she's 150 days in. And so the juice that they're going to pump out of her tummy is really more powerful for the Supreme Yaskin to use for his longevity program. So he goes chasing after her, not knowing that she's actually being transported to the hidden other city of Shambhala, which is hidden under an enormous holographic dome in the desert and hides the world tree, which is Yggdrasil, the tree of knowledge. It's all of that kind of stuff. And there's a multicultural, multi-belief system group of people who are hiding the resources of the last free city from the Supreme Yaskin and the city of Kalki. So there's a chase across the desert. There's a big Mad Maxi chase across the desert. There's a warrior left over from the Mahabharata war, and I'm mispronouncing all this stuff, who's one of those 8-foot tall ancient warriors. And he's played by the Harrison Ford of Indian cinema, a guy called Amitabh Bachchan. And he is like a big old dude who's supremely powerful and carries a big long walking stick. And you can shoot him, he won't die. He is invulnerable, and he has been cursed with living until the next incarnation of the god Krishna comes along, which is the baby that's in this woman's belly. He is sworn to protect that incarnation of Krishna. And he has a big glowing yellow jewel in his forehead, a lot like the Vision in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, though this character predates the Vision by about approximately 5,000 years. So there's this enormous battle as not only does the bounty hunter go up against this guy, but all of Supreme Yaskin's soldiers go up against this guy. And this guy is implacable. He cannot be stopped. There are all these old statues and things in the desert. There's a whole bunch of ruins there. And they have this big battle with all the ruins, with high-tech weaponry, with really groovy guns. It's just mad stuff. And that's only part of the film. I'm not going to go into the rest of the plot. This is mad, full-on, epic, futuristic science fiction mashed up with Hindu mythology stuff. And I had trouble keeping up with it because all the cultural stuff I didn't get till after I came home and went down a rabbit hole of discovering how powerful all of the weapons were in the Mahabharata. And a couple of other ones appear in this movie. There are 2 different bows, which basically could take out the Hulk like that. There is the ultimate weapon. Hindu mythology shits on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's stuff in here that really blows your mind. And so here's what's happened with this movie, which is crazily popular in India, all over India. And it's going to be popular in the Middle East as well. It's going to be popular in Indonesia. There are a lot of Hindu people all across Asia and Australia and America, in Canada and England and everywhere else. So this shit's going to hit wherever it lands. So here's what's essentially happened. You may remember a couple of videos ago, I mentioned the fact that when I watch a biblical epic movie like a Cecil B. DeMille biblical epic movie, I view it as a superhero story because I don't buy the theological stuff. It's just not in me to be at all spiritual or religious. Indian cinema, and particularly Telugu cinema, said to me, hold my beer. Now, the Mahabharata was written 2,300 years ago, and so they've taken this seminal text of the Hindu faith and went, okay, what happens afterwards? What happens after when the Kali Yuga ends and the new incarnation of Krishna comes? I know, we're going to make a science fiction movie based 6,000 years after Mahabharata war, and we're going to tell you the story of what happens in the next incarnations. So what they've done essentially is taken parts of their Bible and turned them into a superhero narrative. And not only that, this is only the first half of the story. The Kalki cinematic universe is going to continue in another movie. We just get to the place where all of the characters are lined up. All of the incarnations of the Hindu gods and demigods are lined up. All of the weapons are, in some cases, in the wrong hands. The Supreme Yaksan gets a dose of superhero serum and gets to use one of the ancient weapons which are in the original text. And then the movie ends. So we've got all of these heroes lined up now. We know who they are. We know how they came to be reincarnated, or in one case, sleeping in a temple until 2898, and we're going to get the big boss battle in the next movie. This movie did my head in, and this movie did my head in a beautifully satisfying way. It made me go and research another culture for a start, and the texts of another culture. And to be honest, the bits I've read of the Mahabharata read a lot better than the Bible. Doesn't matter which version, even King James version, doesn't have anything on this stuff. This stuff is mad, incredible adventure stuff. It's also got moral lessons which aren't judgy in the way that certain Christian moral lessons are. I went down that rabbit hole. Plus, I got to see an incredible action film. Now, the special effects work in this is great. Yes, of course, Hollywood does it better, but there are no sketchy special effects in here. You've got an 8-foot tall guy fighting a whole bunch of normal-sized people and throwing them around like they're puppets. And it works. It lands. The dust works. There's an impact whenever a character hits a wall. A really cute character we meet, and she's then killed by one of the bad guys. There's an enormous cast of characters who are interesting and fun, and at times stupid, at times wise, at times transcendent. It's mind-blowing. It's entertainment most of all. I'm not saying this is a movie that's any deeper than a good, solid, wow action film, because it's not. It's got Indian futurism in the same way Afrofuturism was all over Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It shows its influences pretty broadly. There are bits of it which are influenced by Mad Max, and even though the stunt work is mostly wire work and not practical stunt work in the way George Miller's movies had, it's still pretty impressive. The characters are fun. Even little bits of technology are fun. Somebody throws something and suddenly becomes a pair of handcuffs. All that kind of stuff happens in this movie. And it's immensely entertaining on a bunch of different levels. Now, the bit that gets me is this. Most people don't know about it. People who are pale and English first language speakers like myself don't know about this movie. And many of them aren't willing to go on the learning curve that I went on to enjoy this movie. And that's a shame, because the more we learn about other cultures, the more we learn about the things that make other people smile, the better we're going to be, particularly as far as movie buffs are concerned. I've talked about non-English language genre cinema before. I've talked about the Bumi Langit cinematic universe, which has a whole bunch of Indonesian superheroes that date back to the 1940s. All that stuff is there for us to enjoy. But we don't know about it. You can't enjoy what you don't know about. You can't love what you haven't seen. You can't fully appreciate something unless you go on a little bit of a information cramming session. And I'm fine with that. I am fully capable and fully able and fully passionate about going on a learning curve to watch a movie like this and fully enjoy it. To see the bits in the movie go, what the hell is that bow that guy's got? It looks kick-ass. I want to see what it does and where it came from. And then I go down a rabbit hole of researching that stuff. I got more value from this movie than I did from a lot of other films. For a start, it's 3 hours long. So you've got a lot of stuff there to watch and enjoy. There's no Bollywood dance sequences in it. There are songs that are sung over montages, but this isn't one of those ones where suddenly everyone bursts into song and all the action stops. The music that's in this movie is integral to the movie, and it's done while the action's happening. And there are a whole bunch of cameos in this movie of famous Indian movie stars and people who are in movies. It says Rajamouli, the guy who won the Academy Award for Best Song for his music in RRR. He turns up as a small character in this. Lots of familiar faces from Indian cinema turn up in this. It's a phenomenon, but only to people who aren't white and English speaking, which is kind of crazy to me. Now, I've talked to a few friends, and one of them told me that the distributors of Indian cinema in Australia aren't really good at promoting it to English language film critics, which is a shame. If by some chance somebody from Mind Blowing Films watches this video, promote this to film critics who aren't just of the Indian diaspora, because we want to know about this stuff and we want an opportunity to evaluate and enjoy it. I happened on this film purely by accident because the cinema was full of Despicable Me 58 and Pixar movie number 300. At a time where social media and politics is pulling people apart, stuff like this can bring them together. Preston Sturges' movie Sullivan's Travels has a bit where a movie producer goes on a wander across America because he's bored and he's over being in Hollywood, and he ends up in a chain gang, and all the people in the chain gang get taken to a tiny cinema in a shit-can country town, and they're all sitting there watching really broad, silly comedies and cartoons, and everybody's laughing at them and having a great time enjoying these cartoons because it's a relief from the life they're living, and it's people just having a good time. And this is an epiphany for Sullivan, played by Joel McCrea. When he goes back to Hollywood, he realizes that there's nothing bad about entertaining people. And my feeling about this film is like that. If everybody got in the same cinema and watched this over-the-top, broad action film, comedy, drama, mind-blowing movie, we'd be a lot closer to bringing people together rather than pulling them apart. Indian cinema is great for that. I mean, there are problems with things like Wandering Earth. I went and saw Wandering Earth in a Sydney cinema at the time. I was with a Chinese diaspora audience, but the kind of jingoistic aspect left a slight bad taste in my mouth. It was a Chinese-made film made by the Chinese film industry under the thumb of the Chinese government, and there was a jingoistic aspect to it, and Chinese people are best and only Chinese people could do this kind of stuff aspect to the Wandering Earth movie. This doesn't have any of that. This is a broad and inclusive, over-the-top, crazy science fiction, mythological superhero movie that didn't have any of that flavour to it. So if you get a chance to, check out Kalki 2898 AD. It's going to be a tough watch because your brain's going to be blown. You're going to not know what everything is while you're watching the movie. But you're going to have a good time. It's over-the-top wonderful. I want to see the second film today, but I probably can't because it hasn't been made yet. So that's it for this time around. Crazy over-the-top movie. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and hit the thumbs up. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think about me ranting about this movie. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies or by becoming a channel member. Next up, on Monday, I'm doing a live stream, which I'm looking forward to. And I've got some things for the live stream, which are kind of cool. But this movie's wrung me out. It's in the best possible way. It's like blowing my brain, and I'm slowly picking up all the little pieces and putting them back into my beanie. I'm happy that cinema still has the ability to do that. I hate to be jaded about movies. I hate to be jaded about expanding myself and finding something new. So until next time, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Find a movie that you would never watch under any circumstance, but sounds kind of cool. You got to learn something. You got to have a good time. And I'll catch you next time.